Hello, everyone. I'm sure you're so excited to be with us today as we're talking about this very important, somewhat dry topic, the justice journey, what caregivers should know. So we're going to walk you through some information regarding the criminal justice system and what that might look like for our youth. And this is part of Dnaagdawenmag, Path of the New Heart. This name was gifted to us by one and only John Rice. And this is workshop 7 out of 9, I believe. So we're getting there. Anywho, you may or may not know me. My name is Cody Atwood, Anine Bozo, everyone, and welcome. So I'm so grateful to have you here today in whatever capacity that might be. And you probably already know a little bit about me, but I always like to start off by saying, I work as an autism support worker with Dnaagdawenmag, Binnoojiiyag, Child and Family Services, and we've been doing this program for a little bit now. I originate from Cranbrook, British Columbia, where my grandmother is an elder in the St. Mary's Band, which is part of the Dnaagda Nation. And this nation is very vast, very large. And with that, I'll pass it over to Karina.
Thank you, my friend. Hello, everyone. And as always, thank you for joining us for this and all other topics. My name is Karina Safi. I'm a program consultant with Mackenzie Health, specifically with CBHS, which is the Center for Behavioral Science, Behavioral Department. And as always, I'm lucky and happy to be here to share the space of learning and knowing more information. Thank you.
Miigwech. And you know what? Even though this topic is a little dry, we're going to make it fun today because we're presenting, right? So it's always fun. So first and foremost, we're going to do our song and our smudge. That's, accompanied by some opening words. And we're just hopped past housekeeping a little bit ago, but then we're going to get into the Indigenous justice strategy and the vocabulary that you might hear in the courts if you are ever involved in the courts one day. Then we're going to get into restorative justice. So what exactly is restorative justice? We're going to look at some Gladue reports, what that means, Indigenous Peoples Court, diversion, processes, and programs. And then we're going to get into our elder teaching guided by John Rice. We're going to talk about what it means to find your way in the world. And then we're going to get into our case example, which will take us then into closing. So this is our song. It's the AIM anthem. The AIM stands for American Indian Movement Anthem. It's a 1970s anthem of survival and also of unity. And this was first dedicated to the Yellow Thunder family and later gifted to the American Indian Movement with Anishinaabe words that remind us, Mamwe, Gida, Mashkozimin. This means together we are strong. And its chorus, Boshigo, means that we have to do it, right? It's a call to honor of our commitments, how to walk with courage and stand beside our youth as they seek that justice, seek that belonging, and seek that healing, that good healing. So with me today, before we hop into our song, I'm going to guide us in a smudge. And today I'm going to be thinking about, all the sacrifices that people have made to get where they are today. That's kind of what came to my mind. And, I always think, and this may or may not be even related to this specific workshop, but we plan as much as we can, right? And then things happen to our plans, and a fork is in the road, right? And you have to go so many different ways, and you're thinking of which way to go and which way is the best way to go. But sometimes we just have to let life go where it takes us, right? Because ultimately there is a plan for us. Whether the universe has it, whether we have it, whether our family has it, whether we believe the creator has one for us, I believe that it's, part of the plan to not have a plan sometimes, and we just can go where life takes us. So that's what I'm going to be thinking about today. I'm going to be thinking about our ancestors who came before us. I'm going to be thinking about all the sacrifices that they made to get us to where we are today, right? And the loved ones that have left us but are still with us every part of the way. So with that, I have some cedar. I have some tobacco this time around, and I also have some sage. So miigwech, everyone. And if you have your medicines with you, I encourage you to use them. Miigwech. All right, so I'll just fix my microphone up so we can get to singing. Right. Let's start off with the 4 honor beats, or Karina will let me know if she can hear. So that's an honor song or an anthem, right? And that means we're going to repeat the verse in the song 4 times, right? So that is why we do what we do, because we are honoring, all of creation in that moment by doing that 4 verses. Miigwech. So for language today, I just want to acknowledge the different terms used to describe individuals who experience the world in unique ways, such as shiny people, the gift of being different, autism, ASD, neurodivergent. All of these are valued, right? And we honor the diverse perspectives that they reflect. And for the purposes of today, you will find that shiny people and the gift of being different is the commonly used term. Miigwech.
Thank you. And to elaborate a little bit more on this term, shiny people, uh, when we use this term, we recognize the brilliance and uniqueness of those neurodivergent individuals who are with us, right? Including those with autism and their deeper connection to patterns, sensory input, or specific interests, and other gifts that they have. So we are encouraging you to shift your lens to one of curiosity and respect, and join this workshop with us. Thank you.
And this has to be said, this presentation is for general information purposes only, and it does not replace legal advice. So each youth is going to have a different and very unique experience in the justice system, and court processes are going to vary across Ontario and Canada. This is not a consultation and should not be used as a substitute for professional or legal services. The information is shared out of cultural respect and care, but we just want to be mindful that you seek professionals in case there are any experiences that you're going to be having in the court system. So with that, I just want to take off with our guiding teaching with honoring commitments, right? So when I think about honoring commitments, I also think about our dodoms, our clans, right? They all honor their commitments in their own very unique ways. But our turtle clan, the turtle dodom, I picture the slow, deliberate steps of the turtle and the sturdy protection of its shell. So those movements that it makes, it's going to teach patience and thoughtful actions that remind us of resilience, right? So Turtle Clan, it's long embodied diplomacy, actually. It's also embodied justice. It's also embodied harmony. And they guide their communities in strong relationships with other nations in the Western world. So they do have a lot of experience in honoring commitments, but also in legalities, right? And that teaching can shape how we honor our commitments today. So when we make a commitment, it's more than just agreeing to complete a task, right? It's a sacred promise to walk alongside, our lives, our people with intention, and we can hold that teaching of our spirits to our spirits respectfully, right? So seen in this way, justice itself becomes an act of honoring, and it uplifts the spirits that are hurting, right? And we can support the work of restoration and affirming everyone's rightful place in the circle. So as we begin our workshop, let's carry, the turtle's medicine with us, moving thoroughly and sharing that responsibility for the path ahead. I think that's a good idea. So the Indigenous Justice Strategy, this is pretty new, actually. This is a promising shift that we're going to see in how justice is approached in Canada, and it's one that aims to honor Indigenous laws, address systemic harm, and promote that healing, that good healing. This is the Indigenous Justice Strategy, or IJS for short. It was released in March of 2025 by the Department of Justice Canada. And the IJS was actually initially developed in partnership with First Nations, right? With the Inuit and Métis communities. This is great. And it reflects years of advocacy. So they've sat at this board, they've developed this over a long period of time, and it aligns with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, as well as the National Inquiry into Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls calls for justice, and ongoing movements towards two-eyed seeing, which in this space, I suppose you can call legal pluralism, which is when you recognize both Indigenous law alongside Canadian law. So the vision is strong and it's backed by federal recognition. This is a reformative movement, and it's going to aim in recognizing the strength of Indigenous legal systems while also creating space for culturally grounded approaches to justice. So there's going to be two paths within the strategy. The first one is revitalizing Indigenous legal systems. So this is about returning authority to communities, and it supports elders and community-led justice practices rooted in traditional law. It recognizes Indigenous peoples have long held their own systems for addressing harm, and these systems work when they're respected and resourced. And the second stream is reforming the mainstream justice system. So this takes a look into fixing what is broken in the current system, such as reducing incarceration, reviewing laws, and training justice professionals in cultural awareness, all with the goal of making the system more equitable and responsive. So there's 4 areas of action. The first you can see on the screen here is justice and wellness. So they want to look for holistic approaches for healing. So this will include mental health, trauma recovery, and cultural reconnection. These are going to be built into justice programs and responses. Programs are going to be led by communities and supported with culturally relevant services. For the second, we can go over to policing reform. So police are to be trained in cultural safety and Indigenous history. That's very important. We go into the third, which is corrections and reintegration. This is a strategy that follows towards rehabilitation and community reintegration. It also supports conditional release programs that reflect Indigenous values. And then we can get to our last point here, which is legislative change. So this is a call to action that Indigenous communities will be involved in writing laws that affect them, right? So this is that quote, nothing about us without us. So this ensures that justice policy respects Indigenous rights and governance. But what should you know about this, right? Well, this strategy tells us where we can go, but we're not quite there yet. So some communities and courts are walking this path really, really well, while others, they still have a long way to go. Your advocacy, your stories, and your knowledge can help shape what this journey will look like. And next, we're going to be discussing what vocabulary you might see in the courts. Miigwech.
Thank you. Yeah, so here are some common terms or language within the justice system. And normally, if we were live, right, or in person, we would ask you if there are any terms that you're not familiar with. So since it's a recording, I just invite you to, look through the slide and maybe if some of the terms are not familiar, look it up. It's interesting. While you're doing that, we can move to the next slide that talks about roles and definitions in court. So here again, lots of terms and words, but maybe let's talk about a few important people. Everyone is important, but commonly used terms and roles. So first is judge. So the judge is in charge of the courtroom. They listen to all the evidence, they make sure the rules or the law are followed, and in many cases, they decide what happens. They are meant to be neutral and fair. So then there are two types, I would call it two types of lawyers. First is the crown attorney, is the lawyer representing the government. So their job is to prove that the person charged with a crime actually broke the law. Another type of lawyer is the defense lawyer. This is the lawyer for the person who was charged. They speak for their client, they explain the law, and help protect their rights in court. And a very important role is an Indigenous court worker. So this is someone very, very important in the system for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. They support Indigenous clients in navigating court. They explain what's happening, and they help make sure cultural understanding and community values are respected as well. They can also help connect people to services and programs. So very important person. No pressure at all if you're in this role. So let's move on. A little bit more of common vocabulary, and at some point we'll need some help from you, Cody, to pronounce some things. So the first one, a summary offense. This is so-called less serious crimes, for example, causing disturbance, minor theft. So it's handled quickly in lower courts, lower maximum penalties, relatively. Usually it's a fine or a shorter jail time. Usually no jury trial, only judge hears the case and the judge decides what's happening. And often there is time limit, usually 1 year to lay the charges. The next one, and you tell me please. Indictable. That's the problem. That's the problem word for me. Indictable. Thank you. Indictable offense. So this is so-called like more serious crimes such as robbery, aggravated assault, murder. They can involve longer, more complex court processes, higher maximum penalties, including long prison sentences. The accused often has the right to a jury trial, so not just a judge, but a group of people. We all saw it in the movies. No time limit to lay charges. Something interesting to note here, a person actually can be trialed for both types of offense at the same time, if they have a history. So
Yeah, and they're probably going to be in separate courts. So you might
Absolutely.
have, oh, a night where something goes not quite
Mm-hmm.
right and some decisions might be happening and then something happens that causes you to get a charge, right? Well, you can be charged with a
Absolutely.
summary and an indictable, and these might both be held in different courts, but could happen same night.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So next, we're going to talk about Canadian justice system. Specifically about Criminal Codes of Canada and Youth Criminal Justice Act, because those are two different things. So in Canada, youth have their own justice system, separate from adults, guided by the Youth Criminal Justice Act, or YCJA. This law applies to young people aged 12 to 17 and recognizes that they are still growing and learning. So that's why the Youth Criminal Justice Act focuses on rehabilitation rather than punishment. It aims to help youth take responsibilities in ways that support their development and keep them connected to their community. Privacy is one of the key parts of this. A young person's name and records are protected even more so than the adult system. So that's why if it's a young offender, you will never hear their name or see their name or see their pictures on the TV or media because it's
Mm.
protected by law.
Yeah, it's actually illegal. So if it's
Yeah,
shared, if their name is shared, if their photo is shared, so if let's say you saw something in the news and you recognize what the crime was because maybe it happened in your neighborhood and you heard what the name is, if you were sharing that name and if you were sharing that photo of a youth, then it can actually result in legal trouble.
yeah. So it is protected by law, which is great because it's give this second chance, right? So the heart of this approach is simple: to give youth a chance to learn from their mistakes and move forward with the right support. With that, I'll pass it back to Cody. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to look at restorative justice, which kind of follows like in suit with the Youth Criminal Justice Act, right? So restorative justice, it's a conversation. It's a conversation that realistically like it leads to healing. So instead of asking what rule was broken, we can ask who feels the hurt, what will help them feel whole again, what can the youth do right now to make things better? So youth, they can sit in restorative processes with the person harmed, their family, and an elder or trained facilitator. They hear the impact, they share their own story, and agree on real steps: an apology, repairs, community service, counseling, or treatment. And research actually tells us that processes like these help keep kids in school, that reduces repeat offenses, and it can strengthen family ties. More importantly, participants leave knowing two truths: hurt can be named and it can be mended, right? So an example, because this isn't going to apply for um, every charge. Let's say this isn't going to apply for every offense because it's very specific to the charges that are laid, but maybe it was something smaller, even smaller than a summary charge. A boy breaks a neighbor's window, right? In the circle, he's going to hear how it scared the neighbor's children, right? He agrees to replace the glass, do yard work for a month, and join a Saturday drum group led by an elder. So one circle, 3 months later, to see where they're at, truth and friendship can replace that fear. Um, so when restorative justice is done with respect, with safety, with accountability and empathy, everyone can leave taller and more justified, right? So victims, they're going to gain a voice in this circle as well because they're invited to share their truth and share how they had handled and had coped with that offense, whatever it had been. And then it can build accountability for the youth because, you know, they have to face that judgment, face that fear of going through these RJ programs. And then it reconnects them with communities, right? But on that note, so let's say there was an offense that had been laid that has to go to court, whether summary or indictable. If you are Indigenous, a gladu refers to the right that Indigenous people have under Section 718.2E of the Criminal Code. So with this, I invite us to see gladu reports as a listening tool. So it would ask the court to pause and to hear everything that shaped this young Indigenous person's path. I want to be very clear here. This isn't specifically for Indigenous youth. It's for Indigenous people. So it's not specified to the youth, but in this workshop, it will significantly help them. I invite you to reflect. So imagine a youth that you care about standing before a judge. I want you to write this down, this part. If you could place three pieces of their life story on that desk so the court can understand them, which details would you choose? I would like you guys to pause, think for a moment, because realistically, this is what it does, right? So Gladue reports, they're so much more extensive than just the three things. They'll take up to 40 to 60 hours to complete. And this is going to include research, interviews, writing, presentations, you name it, right? A Gladue report gathers exactly those pieces that people just shared that you guys had, just discovered in your minds and more. So it includes the family story, where you grew up, community ties, culture, the effects of intergenerational trauma, residential schools, child welfare context and displacement, mental well-being imbalances, diagnoses, and or substance use. So if the youth has experienced abuse or violence, this would be a place where this could be shared. Gifts, talents, and educational or career goals that this youth carries. So it's not only what has traumatically impacted them, but it's also what they hope to do with their plan moving forward. It'll talk about supports or ceremonies or programs that are going to be ready for them to guide that healing. And you're probably wondering, well, who writes these? Well, trained writers actually create the report with the youth, with their family, and often an elder. And every line answers one question: what path will genuinely repair harm and help the young person and the people harmed walk well? So the judge will then weigh decisions that fit the life in front of them. However, this is important. It is up to the judge's discretion on recommendations for the next step or whether they can take the suggestions provided. So remember earlier how I was talking about how some courts are really walking this journey well, and they're taking these Gladue reports, they're taking, restorative justice, and they're looking at through a different lens. Some courts might not be as progressive, so it really depends. But, this can mean that the youth might see counseling, they might do cultural mentorship, they might go into community service or treatment plans. And studies in Ontario actually show that these tailored sentences lower repeat offenses and build safer communities. So Gladue reports writers are found in many different areas. I know in Anishinaabe Legal Services Ontario or Toronto, I believe they have Gladue writers. But when you're in court, you're going to make this decision known, like you're going to make them aware that you want a Gladue report, and then the Indigenous court worker will be able to refer you to someone who will be able to write that report as well. So if maybe you don't have a service on hand today that will be able to do this, they will be able to guide you in how to obtain one of these. So if your child goes into contact with the law, definitely what I'm saying here is ask for the Gladue report early. It's going to turn a courtroom moment into a chance for that truth, dignity, and hope. And Gladue reports must be ordered with the consent of the person accused. So if the child or youth does not want a Gladue report, it's very likely that, it's up to their discretion of whether they want it or not. Although I would strongly recommend it, right? So there's also Indigenous Peoples Courts. This is also known as Gladue Courts. So there's Gladue reports and courts. Funny, hey? So as compared to the last slide, Indigenous Peoples Courts, it's not a document, right? Although it contains documents. It is a courtroom that is scheduled, a courtroom schedule that is set aside for files that involve First Nations, Métis, or Inuit accused. This session applies to criminal code provisions every time that it sits. So we have the first provision that I was talking about a couple minutes ago, section 718.2E of the criminal code. And this is just telling the judge to look at Indigenous background and consider alternatives to incarceration. So this is actually required by law for them to consider alternatives. And then we have section 493.2B. So this does the same. It's pretty much the same as 718.2, but it does this at the bail stage, right? So before we even get to trial, if we get to trial, it's going to consider it at the bail stage. It's going to ask whether pretrial detention is truly necessary, once those factors are weighed. So it just asks the judge to do the same, but at the bail stage. So the process that goes inside the session, the matter is called in front of a judge who has training in GLADU principles, which all of them pretty much do for the most part. Like they're required again by law to consider these. And then an elder or knowledge keeper offers opening words or a brief prayer when appropriate. The Indigenous court worker will outline services, diversion programs, or circle options. Then the defense, Crown, and support teams meet. So for the person accused and for the victim or the person or the defense, the Crown essentially are going to meet with the defense attorney. And the support teams are going to meet as well. Often it's going to be in an open courtroom to shape a proposed bail plan or a sentence that focuses on safety, accountability, and healing. The judge will then review the plan, they'll confirm the conditions, they might make some changes, and they're going to set monitoring through community agencies. And as you can see on the screen here, I have the Ontario Court Justice Celine Dorville shows that the Eagle's Feather will be present at proceedings in Ottawa's first Indigenous Peoples Court. That photo specifically is by David Kawai, which is from Post Media. So key distinctions, a GLADU report is a written document used in any courtroom. But then GLADU courts, these are specific courts that are scheduled. And these provisions to the code are applicable in every courtroom, but not just GLADU courts. So while there are specialized courts, the provisions like 718.2E and 492.B or 492 something B, that's going to be considered in all courts. So for you guys, what I want you to know, the practical step is to ask for counsel or the Indigenous court worker to transfer the matter into this docket early if you're wanting the case to go to Indigenous Peoples Court. There is a specialized court for Indigenous youth in Toronto that Karina will be mentioning later, which will be included in well, normally it would be included in the take-home notes, but after the video, I'll look up specifically what court that is. And then doing this early is going to ensure bail and sentencing decisions follow the spirit and letter of the provisions. And now what does diversion look like? So I kind of talked about it a little bit, but I want to take a deeper lens into it. So picture a youth standing at a fork in the road, like I was talking about in our smudge today. One path leads deeper into the courtroom and one into recidivism. So recidivism is a higher likelihood of reoffending. The other invites them to circle protocol, where accountability and healing can take place. Indigenous diversion chooses that circle, right? So together they speak to the truth of what happened. They craft community, they craft accountability measures, they provide therapeutic support for the person harmed as well as the youth. It'll look like cultural mentoring, or perhaps an Indigenous-led treatment program. So a court worker keeps everyone connected and updates the judge on the progress. So when a plan is honored, charges can be withdrawn and the youth can step forward with a second chance. And I think in this moment, it's important to ask a lawyer or Indigenous court worker early if this is an approach that can be applicable. So it's not going to be the same for every offense, which is why it's important to seek that legal advice and ask if this is something that could be applicable to the specific charge that you have. Many youth actually can start diversion even before a bail hearing. So what this might look like, of course, is dependent on the program, offense and community, and diversion, but it's going to potentially include that healing circle, the teachings or ceremonies led by elders, those Indigenous-led treatment programs like Dnaagdawenmag, for example, they offer them, cultural mentorship or life skills programming, an apology or restitution to the victim. And this is going to be when appropriate, right? And then community service, storytelling, or education about the impacts of behavior. So there are 3 pieces that have to line up to make this happen. 1, the offense was an eligible low-risk charge. So it's probably going to look like a first-time charge, nonviolent, theft under 5,000, mischief, breach, or simple possession. There's not a lot of leeway here. It's got to be pretty like low risk. 2, A local Indigenous justice program has space. So typically urban hubs like Toronto, Ottawa, Hamilton, Thunder Bay, Brantford, Sault Ste. Marie, and friendship centers in these places, right? Some may have some northern communities or on reserve courts. They might have some. So First Nations communities might have GLADU linked diversion through Indigenous justice programs. With smaller courts, diversion is still possible, but it would likely be mainstream and it might lack the elder support or cultural components. But regardless, it's still good to look into whatever diversion is nearest you. And then Crown consent. This is the most important part. The Crown has to consent to this. So the person who is representing the victim or Canada in this case, and it would look like, having to talk to the lawyer or duty counsel or to the Indigenous court worker about Indigenous diversion. And it's really dependent on whether or not Crown says that they are a go-ahead for diversion. They have to agree. Regardless, if they say no, it's not going to happen. And it can be possible to enter into diversion from custody and not go to bail, but of course, it depends on the case. So there's Indigenous ceremonies in courts as well, and here's some rights that Indigenous individuals can request, including youth, in both virtual and in-person courts. Well, first, smudging ceremonies. These need to be requested in advance, though. They need to be there needs to be an accommodation form that's filled out. There's a very specific one that you can find online. It's an accommodation form that's submitted via email or in person to the tribunal. They may even offer designated spaces, and they'll probably allow virtual accommodation for this practice too. And then recognition of Indigenous identity and experiences. I might have already said this in other words, but I just want to be very clear that you have the right to ensure your identity is known to the court. Judges are required to consider a person's background, including colonial impacts, as part of the GLADU principles that we just finished referencing. So make sure that your Indigenous identity is known. And participation in Indigenous courts or diversion models. Where available, you can request to their counsel, right, that the option of taking part of healing-focused models is something that you'd like to explore. Support from elders. In many courtrooms, you can request to have an elder or Indigenous knowledge keeper attend to support them spiritually or emotionally. And for prayer, you may request that your proceeding begin or end with a prayer. Of course, it's so long as I believe that it doesn't disrupt the court processes. And then cultural attire. This is something that's absolutely a protected right. So you may wear traditional regalia or hold sacred bundles, like an eagle feather, for example, for strength. But this is also provided that the courtroom flow stays orderly. This is a protected spiritual right. And then we're going to move on to alternative dispute resolutions. I want to be very clear about where this is and where this isn't appropriate. So first and foremost, I kind of want to talk about the medicine wheel. Well, the medicine wheel, it reminds us that healing includes spirit. It includes emotion, thought, and action. And healing also takes into account the responsibility that we have to ourselves and to others. So ADR is offered only when a person is ready to take ownership and work towards repair. So it brings together community and accountability to support real change, only when it's safe, appropriate, and guided with intention. So there's common types of ADR, which is mediation. A trained neutral party walks and helps both sides through the issue. Circle processes, these are of course rooted in Indigenous traditions. These talk about the impact, responsibilities, and steps. Restorative justice conferences, this is a structured meeting between the person who caused the harm, the person harmed, and support people. And then abriation, this is less common, but this is where both parties agree to let a neutral person make a decision. It's kind of like a private judge. And then very, very clearly, this is where ADR is not going to support. So serious criminal offenses, for example, violent or sexual crimes, assault causing bodily harm, sexual assault, weapons charges, or homicide. These cases pose serious risk to public safety, trauma to the victim, and complex legal implications. 2, when the offender denies responsibility, the person accused of harm forfeits and does not take responsibility. So the way that restorative justice works is that its approach relies heavily on voluntary participation and willingness to accept responsibility. Without this, processes cannot move forward. 3, there's a power imbalance or safety concerns that exist. So, for example, domestic violence cases, bullying where one person feels unsafe. If there is coercion, fear, or risk of re-traumatization, ADR can actually do more harm than good. So these situations, they need formal protections such as legal representation, court orders, and no contact conditions. So it wouldn't be possible to assist in those cases. High risk repeat offending. So someone that has already had many chances through diversion or ADR and continues to re-offend. So courts may determine that restorative or alternative measures have been exhausted, and a more structured legal response is necessary to protect others or address deeper needs. And then 5, of course, this is pretty clear, but certain legal procedures are going to have dominance. For example, trials that include those indictable or more serious offenses, like I was mentioning earlier, offenses need formal sentencing. So these are structured legal processes that are required by law. A judge or jury must make a legal determination, and ADR cannot replace that role. Miigwech.
Thank you. So on this note, let's talk about legal representation options. On this slide, we try to combine everything and put everything in the little table. So first, duty counsel. Duty counsel is available for free at a court, usually to help with the first appearances or bail hearing. It's a good starting point, especially if someone doesn't really have a lawyer yet, but it's typically this is the short-term support, short-term option. Next, there's the legal aid certificates. They can help cover the cost of a private lawyer, but eligibility is really based on an income and the type of legal issues. So that not everyone can have it. The client must apply through Legal Aid Ontario. And if approved, they can choose a lawyer who accepts the legal aid. So a little bit of search will require. Next, private lawyers. Private lawyers are paid out of pocket, but offer more continuity and control over who represents the individual. This is often preferred for complex or long-term cases if the person can afford it. I just want to add, sometimes some of the, not saying that it's a very, achievable, but sometimes I've had a few clients where, those private lawyers, because they have to do provide some services pro bono, which means for free as act of volunteering for the licensing. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can get that support from a private lawyer, actually, but that requires lots of search, some luck, I think, but just putting it out there because based on personal experience. Next, let's see transition to NIHB, which stands for Non-Insured Health Benefits, which is a program in Canada that provides health benefits to First Nations and Inuit people who are registered under the Indian Act. So for First Nations and Inuit clients eligible under NIHB, some supports related to legal matters, they can be covered, particularly when there's a mental health piece involved. So an NIHB can cover mental health counseling with a therapist or psychologist. Mental health related medications can be covered also, and the transportation to get an appointment or appointments. In some cases, even psychological assessment may be funded, if they are necessary for legal or health issues. So that's important to remember. And here, let's talk about some of the key points to know about court processes in Ontario. Again, mental health court. Since we're speaking about mental health court is a special kind of court for people who are struggling with mental health imbalance. Instead of just focusing on the crime, it tries to understand why it happened, especially if it's linked to someone's mental well-being, mental imbalance, right? The goal is to support rather than punish, recognizing that untreated mental health imbalance can affect behavior. In some cases, the court can offer alternatives to jail, like diversion programs or supervised treatment plans. It's usually held in a special courtroom with judges, lawyers, and social workers who understand mental health. Next, there's accessibility in court. That's an important part to know, important piece to know. This means making sure everyone can understand and take part in their court process. That includes interpreters, wheelchair access, accommodations for learning needs, and even the option to go to court online in some situations or over the phone. It's about making the justice system more inclusive and respectful and, give more access to it. We also have youth court, right? So we talked about it. This is for people between 12 and 17 years old. It's based on a law called Youth Criminal Justice Act. Youth have access to legal aid, support workers, and community programs. Again, their identity is protected. It's also important to remember, right, if by any means you're involved with that. And youth are given the chance to learn from mistakes. And finally, again, another important piece, there are Indigenous-specific youth court options in some parts of Ontario, since we're coming to you from Ontario. One example is the Indigenous Youth Wellness Court in Toronto. It includes elders, cultural supports, and healing-focused plans. It recognizes the effects of colonization and tries to offer a more respectful path forward, one that's rooted in culture, community, and wellness. So basically, the approach blends restorative justice, cultural teachings, and trauma-informed care to support Indigenous youth in a way that reflects who they are. And with that, we're moving on to the next slide. So fitness and not criminally responsible assessment. This slide is about two important mental health related assessments, right? And you can see the names, fitness to stand trial and not criminally responsible, or usually it's called NCR. Both are meant to ensure the fairness when mental health imbalance significantly affects a person's ability to participate in the legal system. Fitness to stand trial. So if the Crown attorney, judge, or defense lawyer believes a youth can't participate, it's not just for youth, sorry, I need to clarify that. So a person cannot participate meaningfully in court, they can request a fitness assessment. A person is unfit to stand a trial if they cannot understand the nature of court proceedings, or they cannot communicate with or instruct their lawyer. Assessment can occur whether the youth or person is in custody or not. If found unfit, there is an option of treatment orders, so medication or mental health treatment, or if successful, court resumes. If not successful, the case moves to the Ontario Review Board, or it's a bit of dry of information, but let's try to move on. So next, not criminally responsible, or NCR, when it's ordered. It focuses on the individual state of mind at the time of the offense, specifically of the act, right? Person may be found NCR if they didn't understand the nature or quality of their actions in the moment, or they didn't know it was wrong due to imbalance of their mental well-being. Again, if found not criminally responsible, the case moves to the Ontario Review Board. And what is this Ontario Review Board? It includes a psychiatrist, a judge, lawyer, and community member. So their role to assess security and supervision needs, to determine privileges, for example, community access, and manage transitions back into community. For caregivers, we have a tip. Both fitness and NCR assessments are designed to ensure fairness and provide necessary support from a place of healing. And so as a caregiver, how can you help? Support honest conversations about mental well-being, mental imbalance, right? Help with appointments and follow through. Advocate for youth-friendly, culturally sensitive explanations that respect both Indigenous way of knowing and Western legal processes. So basically, try to support as much as you can. Thank you.
Just have to do the best that we can in the moment, right? It's always where it comes to. So this is the importance of belonging and spirit restoration. This is really going to link well to our video, but this is through James Dumont, his teachings on hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose. And I was first introduced to James Dumont's teachings through John Matson. So I really appreciate those long conversations that we've had about these teachings, right? James Dumont, he teaches that every person needs belonging, needs purpose, identity, and well-being, right? This circle support to live well. He also teaches that hope can complete our circle. So when one piece of our medicine wheel is impacted, our circle is going to wobble, right? Youth can lose confidence or act from pain, and reconnecting to the pieces that they need to restore their cultural identity is going to be especially important, especially after contact with the law. So research affirms that when a young person feels a sense of belonging to family, community, peers, they're better able to cope with adversity, right? So one powerful cultural response for healing and doing and going through and finding your identity are naming ceremonies, right? So let's reflect on why this matters. And so Anishinaabe youth, Blue Thunderbird, Oshashko, I believe his name is, Oshashko Bynes. He describes how reclaiming his Ojibwe spirit name helped him stand proud again after feeling disconnected from his cultural identity due to the effects of colonization. He remarked by stating that young Indigenous people face an adversity crisis, an identity crisis, especially in urban areas that, quote unquote, reclaiming traditions is necessary so that future generations do not lose them completely. So that's what he was stating in this piece that I'm going to link at the end of the presentation. And you know what? A naming ceremony, it places hope, belonging, meaning, and purpose back into their circles. So the name, it speaks to their future, and we can welcome the youth by that name, and they'll know that their spirit is being fed. The name carries teachings, it carries stories, and the youth receives roles and responsibilities attached to it. So I think what I'm trying to get here is that roles and responsibilities actually could be a prevention strategy, right? A prevention to being involved or getting involved in the criminal justice system because we're giving them their identity, we're giving them their peace, they're going to feel that belonging in relationships and emotions and meaning and the reflection in their mind and purpose with their action and wisdom. It's going to feel our purpose. We're going to know that we're loved and that we're needed. We're going to understand our story and our gifts, and we're going to use these gifts in service. If we have the ability to do this, or if we can gently lead to the youth to do this, they're less likely to get involved in the criminal justice system. So we're now going to hear from Elder Knowledge Keeper John Rice. He's going to share on how finding your place really anchors youth in their medicine wheel and it can guide them towards balance. So I'll stop sharing here for one moment. We're going to hop on over. So this is 12 minutes long. We're going to watch the full 12 minutes. I'm just going to open it completely.
Okay, so we're going to talk about there's a phrase in the language, Anisheshnakazian. It means, what are you called? What is your name? And that's really important to our identity. One of the things in our culture, the individual is really important. So having your identity right down to who you are is what keeps you whole and in balance. So we're going to talk a little bit about names and how we have names for our young people. But I want to take your minds back to pre-Columbian times before Columbus came here. We all had names in our language. We all addressed each other by our language in our names. So over time, though, through colonization, we weren't allowed to use that practice. So many of us carry English names, French names, or names in languages that aren't ours. So that in itself creates a false identity. Okay? So it's like for me, my name is John. Hey, that's an English name. I'm named after my father and my great-great-grandfather. So that's it. But my Ojibwe name is Zalgoske, which means sun ray. And my grandmother, she saw that name in a vision. She saw a ray of sunlight go across the sky before the sun came up, and she says, that's me, Zalgoske. So that has a lot more value to me. That means who I am, right down to my spirit, is what we say. Because another thing we say nowadays, people will ask you, do you have your spirit name yet? Hey, they're not meaning you just your spirit's name. The spirit name just lets you know your whole existence is that name. I'm Zalgoske in body, mind, and spirit. But my grandmother saw it through the spirit and saw it is a spirit in creation. If you wake up in the morning, you ever see that, or you have sunlight going across the sky before the sun comes up, it'll remind you of me. And that was the beauty of our names. Eh? When you know someone, if her name was Joshko Gijek, blue sky, every time you looked at the blue sky, you'd be reminded of that person. And even now, this little, if you have a little girl, her name is Wakshance. Every time you saw a little fox, you would think about her. There's such an interrelationship and interconnection in our way of being that you would know someone, you would know them by their name, you would know their connection to creation. That's the power of our names, right down to our spirits, our connection to life. But naming is really important in this day and age because it returns the person to their spirit, first of all. It returns us to our culture, but it's also the biggest way we could use our language. So even if you never spoke any language outside of just saying your name, you're asking everybody to say your name in our language. So everybody's speaking our language by talking to you. That's a very empowering concept at this day and age. When you think about someone who's in school, maybe he's in grade 6. His name is Giggons, a little otter. And the teacher calls him Giggons every time she addresses him. Can you imagine how empowered that makes him feel? That's who he is. And even in that environment of school, he's being addressed by the name that came to him through his grandparents from the spirit world. So naming is very important. It's our identity. We say that what happened to us before we came to life, we had a conversation with the Creator. And our people, we think, well, we more than think, we are the most intelligent beings on earth because of these concepts that I'm sharing with you now. Before every one of us was born, we spoke to the Creator. And the Creator told us everything. The Creator didn't want us to come to life and just bump into things. So the Creator told us the creation story, many other things. Our mother, our father, our spirit helper, anything that we wanted to know. You might have even asked some offhand questions, and the Creator would have answered you. Is the way we looked at it. So in this time you sat and spoke with the Creator, we say you gained the knowledge of the universe. You knew everything the Creator knew. In our language, we call the Creator Gitche Manedo, the great mystery. The one who is everything is what we called it. And we are a Manedo. We are a mystery too. So in sitting with the Creator, the great mystery, we got to know everything in the universe, is the way the story says. So what happened to us, in this conversation, we started to evolve a sense of purpose. Why is the Creator talking to me this way? Why is the Creator telling me all of this? And maybe some of us said, maybe the Creator wants me to go there to life, is what we started to think during this conversation. Whatever you sat with the Creator and however you spoke to the Creator, they say, eventually there came a time where you felt full. And you said that, Mishomis, Nokmis, I'm full. I know enough. I'm ready to go there now, is what you said. So we say that the minute you said that to the Creator, we say you stood up to leave the Creator. When you stood up to leave the Creator, that's when you had your spirit name. For me, that's when I became Zagosage, a sun ray. And they say that I brought my name to creation. So we bring our names here, and we come to life with this name. And back in the day, you would be born, the shock of your birth made you forget a lot of the knowledge that you shared with the Creator. But you weren't born empty-headed. You brought a knowledge into this place, is what you brought. And what would happen not too long after you're born, back in the day, your grandparents, one of them would dream about you. And they'd go to your parent, they'd say, I dreamt about this one. And the parent would say, what is the dream? So they would tell your parent the dream, and they'd say, oh, okay. And then they would have your naming ceremony. Not too long after you're born, they would invite the whole village to come. And then that's what they would do. Your grandparent would tell the village the dream that goes with your name. And then the grandparent would announce your name. They would say your name to the east, and the whole village would say your name back to you. They would say your name to the south. The whole village would say your name back to you. They'd announce your name to the west. The whole village would say your name back to you. They'd announce your name to the north, and the whole village would announce your name back to you. Even the earth world would hear your name, and the village would announce back to you. And then the sky world, so that the Creator, Gichamanado, would hear us that we know your name. They would announce your name to the sky world, and the whole village would say your name back to you. The whole village represents creation. Eh? Everybody represents creation. It's like I said, our names are a piece of creation. And so you would hear creation say our name to you. And because we're thinking beings, you were thinking in your mother's womb, you were thinking not too long after you were born, you would say this. You would say, they know my name here. I came to the right place. That's a thought that you would have that would bring you into life. It's one of the most beautiful welcoming ceremonies we have for our newborns. Welcome them into life by showing them we know their name. So then they would come into life carrying their name not too long after their birth. Now the beauty about names, the kind of name you have actually brings you into a society of names. Let's say, for example, your name was a Nimkis, little thunderbird. Everybody with a thunderbird. Maybe there was an old man, and then his name was maybe Jonya Nimki, shining thunder. He would say about that baby, he's got a thunder name like me. I can help him grow into his name because I grew into a similar name. I grew into a thunderbird name, is what he would say. So even just by someone hearing your name, you had a coach or a mentor who could help you grow into your name. There were all kinds of names, medicine names, if your name was Sama, animal names, maybe your name was Gigo, animal names, tree names, Matikanabe, sky names, Gijik, all names. You're born into a society of names, and people with similar names at your birth, they had an idea of how to help you grow up because they grew up in a similar name. And that was our education system. Our education system was based on your name because the village would hear your name and they would take it upon themselves to help you grow into your name, is what they would do. So it was a very individual idea that they would help this young man become who they are meant to be by their name. So when you hear someone's name, you have an idea of who they are. You also have a little bit of an idea of why they're here, because that's what their purpose will be then as they get older. They'll learn about their life purpose. And in their name are hints as to why they're here. My name's Augoske, or Sunray. After I received that name, I was encouraged to learn all about the different aspects of that name. One of the interpretations I was told is that it means the sun can punch through the darkest cloud. And in my life, I never intended to, but that's where my life led me. I became involved in suicide intervention. And that goes with my name. The sun punches through the darkest cloud. There's another meaning too. It says when you see a sun ray touching the lake in the summertime through the clouds, it means he who feeds the thunders is what it means. So that adds to the spirituality that I follow and how I do things. So the name can help the person find their life purpose. It can help them find other elements of themselves. And we give that to our young ones. They have a good idea or a clue as to what they're going to be when they grow up. And that's what the names do. And at one time, we all had our names, to remind ourselves. It was common. It wasn't a mystery. That's what we do. So that's what it's a beautiful time now that people are picking up our names again. For me, I didn't get my name until I was 25 because of the government and the church. But my grandmother found my name at my age when I asked her to. So it's still there. And like I say, you bring your names here, you carry it here until it's announced, then you get to hear it. Creation hears it. So the naming is so important to our identity. It lets you know who you are. It lets you know where you're going. It can give you insights into the three values, body, mind, and spirit, as those different elements who you are. And it's beautiful to see our young people naming their children again, and even our older people knowing what their spirit names is. Because at one time, everybody on Turtle Island went by their name and the language, and maybe we'll return to that again. Uh-huh.
So I think something really important from that is the fact that you can get your spirit name at any time, right? So your name follows you. It follows, your journey, your life, right? You have it before you come into this world. You're going to have it throughout your life and when you leave this world, right? So you can get it anytime. There's no time restriction. So that's really good that he mentioned that because a lot of people are curious. Well, if I didn't get it when I was young, am I going to be able to get it, right? Karina, can you see my notes? You can?
No, I can't. Sorry.
No? Okay, perfect.
I was saying yes, everything is okay. On
So
autopilot.
we've come to our break. I encourage you guys to actually take a 5-minute pause and then come back and listen to us because, this is a lot. It's a lot of information, and I don't blame you guys if you're like, oh my goodness. So take your time, unpause, and we'll get back. Miigwech.
We'll still be here because we're on record. Yes. So hopefully you did have that little break. And let's move back to all this information, right? And let's talk about a charge that comes up more often than many expect with the individuals we support, the criminal harassment. So this is called Section 264, and why this matters for shiny people, for neurodivergent people. Many shiny youth are socially motivated, but they may struggle with understanding social norms or social boundaries and indirect communication, exactly because of their gifts, right? Because they see this world differently. And they may sometimes misunderstand some cues that someone is, uncomfortable with them or they want to disengage. They persist in communication when trying to connect or repair a relationship because of this, natural desire. As all of us, we want to connect as humans. Sometimes they might not recognize when behavior is being perceived as threatening or unwanted because intent is good, right? So even when intent is not harmful, the legal system is focused on the impact of that other person, right? Specifically, whether it's caused fear or distress or not. So what is criminal harassment? Section 264. Under the Criminal Code of Canada, criminal harassment refers to conduct that causes another person to reasonably fear for their safety. The charge can be laid if someone is engaged in some of those behaviors that you can see on the slide. Those are just examples. The list is longer probably. So this is a charge that we must be especially mindful of in our work because you seeking connection, right? And you seeking connection may accidentally cross legal boundaries, right? Especially if they, don't interpret no contact statement clearly, try to reconnect with peers after rejection. Again, those are all natural intents, especially for younger people, right? They all seek connection, they learn about this world. So for caregivers and workers, the key takeaway, try to teach social boundaries and the importance of consent in communication. Help youth understand how their actions might be perceived regardless of intent. Work preventatively, right? So role plays, visual support, and structured social opportunities can go a long way, even though it sounds small and maybe sometimes unnecessary. This is an area where education and early intervention are often more powerful than reaction in the moment. You can help reduce legal risks and improve peer relationships by helping youth build safe, respectful ways to connect. And I think that's it from me on the slide. Thank you.
And you know what? I do think that accountability should be held for everyone, right? And that's really important in this is teaching our youth that, there are consequences to our actions at the end of the day, whether or not, we have a neurodivergent presenting youth or a neurotypical presenting youth, right? It's important that we all hold that accountability in our hearts and we honor those commitments that we make, right? So this connects back to the very first point.
Yeah.
But how many times might you be expected to be in court, right? So the real answer to that is that it depends. It's never probably going to be the exact same as someone else, and it depends on the case. So imagine it like a doctor visit. You have a minor scrape and maybe, maybe there's like a flesh wound, right? And, there might be maybe 2 or 3 check-ins, and potentially even some stitches to ensure that, the wound stays closed and healthy and clean. But if you have a broken bone, well, there's going to be more appointments. There's going to be x-rays. There's going to be a follow-up around cast removal, even maybe some physical therapy. So let's break it down into averages that you guys might see dependent on a summary offense versus an indictable offense. Well, for summary offenses, again, dependent on the case, it's an average of 2 to 5 appearances from first court to resolution. So the typical sequence follows. First appearance, this is where you may enter a plea, set dates for next steps. So this is going to be disclosure, discussions, and then there might be a Crown resolution meeting. This is optional. This is an off-record meeting where defense and Crown discusses plea deals or diversion. So that's where the ADR comes in. And then you're going to set a date or judicial pretrial. So if there's no earlier resolution at that Crown meeting, a date is set for trial or for a guilty plea. And then that's when you get to plea or trial, where you're going to either plead guilty or innocent, and then a sentence may follow the same day or potentially separately, usually separately, to proceed to trial. So sentencing, if it's not immediate, this is if you're found guilty after the trial, and sometimes sentencing can happen at a later date as well. So you might be found guilty one day and then sentenced another day. And then some summary cases may resolve very quickly. Guilty pleas at first or second appearance can be common. Others can drag out, right? Especially if there's negotiations or they look at programming or ADR, diversion, right? Or maybe there's trial preparation that's needed. So typically 2 to 5 appearances, potentially more if you do engage in those diversion sentences. Indictable offenses. So this is going to be much different. There's going to be 5 to 10 plus appearances, dependent on the seriousness of the crime. And these are much slower, more procedural. It has to be done in a very specific way. So first, you're going to there's going to be multiple disclosure meetings, right? So this is where your GLADU report is meant to be ordered at the very beginning. And again, I want to remind you guys, because I didn't make it specific for the summary offense, you can get a GLADU report even for your summary offense as well, right? And I actually encourage it. So you get your GLADU report to be ordered as early as possible. First appearance is your basic administrative start. So there's not going to be a plea entered at this time. You're going to set the next court date for disclosure. Disclosure appearances, the Crown will provide evidence, which is also known as disclosure, to the defense. This can take several months dependent on the complexity. And then you're going to get into your judicial pretrial. This is a private meeting with the judge. It's not the trial. It's not going to be the trial judge. It's going to have the Crown there and the defense to narrow issues and discuss possible resolution. Then you're going to get into your preliminary hearing. These are for very serious cases. You're going to see if there's enough evidence that exists to proceed to trial. This might take 1 to 3 court dates by itself. And then trial scheduling, one of our favorite things. There's going to be many administrative appearances that happen to set dates if proceeding to trial. Many. Based on experience, just with clients that I've assisted through the system, a lot of them are very administrative before they get to trial or sentencing. So trial is probably going to be multi-day or even multi-week, dependent on the case. And then you're going to get into sentencing. Your sentencing hearing, if guilty, a separate date will often happen for sentencing arguments. And then Indigenous youth or adults may have, of course, have your GLADU reports ordered before sentencing, if possible, at your earliest convenience. This is going to probably add 2 to 3 more court dates for preparation and review. So you're likely looking at on the latter side, so 10 plus appearances, dependent on that discussion that you have with your lawyers and such.
Thank you. But before you actually get into the court, you have to have initial contact with the justice system, because the court is not it. So usually police are often the first responders in youth justice cases. And legally, they must consider alternatives to charging, especially if there's a neurodivergent youth or shiny youth, right? So before charging, some options that police has. Verbal warning, formal caution, referral to community programs. These are called extrajudicial measures, and they aim to hold users accountable without a criminal record. That's important, right? However, if charges are laid, there are two outcomes. First, person might be released with a court date and fingerprinting info and the date for that. Or second outcome, the person may be held in custody, but they must see a judge within 24 hours, and this is for the bail hearing. Bail hearing, it's where a judge decides if youth is, will be continued to held in custody, will be released without supervision, or released with supervision, for example, bail program or surety. I think that brings us to the next part of presentation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that puts us at our case example. So you see Alex here, he's OG Cree. Well, he's proud of that, right? He's proud that he's an OG Cree youth who has the gift of being different, right? So he has been formally diagnosed through Western Services with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, and he has a way of processing the world that brings these unique strengths and perspectives. So Alex, he's deeply intuitive and sensitive to the environment. His connection to surroundings, for example, the sights, sounds, people, it's strong, and he often notices changes and emotions that others may miss. Alex's journey has also included experiences of trauma and challenges within his family and his educational environment, which has shaped how he responds to stress or overwhelming situations. During times of sensory overload, so when things are becoming a bit too much in his environment, or emotional stress, Alex's instinct is to sometimes seek space or to express himself very loudly in public settings. So community members who are unfamiliar with Alex's history have been frightful in these moments, which has resulted in frequent, so that's important, the police have visited before, frequent police presence during escalations. These experiences can intensify Alex's stress and feelings of unsafety. So Alex, he's especially sensitive to police uniforms, right? He's been in contact with them before, so this might be scary. He's sensitive to flashing lights and to the sirens. This can serve as a trigger linked to past experiences of fear and loss of control. So what happened? Well, during lunch, Alex felt a rush of sensory overwhelm, which caused a deep feeling of anxiety, right? So this prompted Alex to run outside, and he was still holding his spoon at that moment. Alex paused outside of his neighbor's home, and he let out a loud vocal behavior, which frightened them. Unsure of what was happening, their neighbors phoned the police for assistance, right? So this isn't the first time that police have arrived at the home, which probably means that they likely do have a file. So officers, they arrived, they chose a safety first approach. They drove Alex to the hospital for assessment. This proved difficult for Alex, as we know that he finds police uniforms and lights quite triggering, so I could imagine that his behaviors might have been intense on the drive over. Once they arrived at the hospital, this gave Alex the ability to calm down after speaking to a physician, right? So the physician noted that he was no longer harm or risk to himself or anyone else, which supported a discharge home. Soon after, the family learned that Alex has been charged with uttering threats with a weapon. So I just want to take a moment here, get your journal out or type on your computer, whatever you might be doing in this moment. What happens next for Alex, given the information that we learned, as well as prior to our case example where we talked about the steps that might happen after first contact with the police. So take a moment, if you have to rewind for a second, to look back, what is going to happen to Alex next for him?
And let's pretend you already did that. So, and let's talk about next steps, mostly from the behavioral perspective, right? So this slide outlines the immediate next steps for Alex. They will need to first attend fingerprinting, a process that might be distressing due to the sensory sensitivities and trauma linked to the police presence, right? So one of the strategies we can offer is to prepare Alex using a visual work through or social stories or storytelling, right? Also, we can use desensitization, for example, using finger paint and role play to practice. And in the day of attending fingerprinting, it would be a very good idea to have some sensory supports ready, whether it's, gloves, sometimes maybe to put it on after wipes or whatever it is for the specific individual, and to have a trusted adult present, or maybe more than one trusted adult present. So next, there will be meeting with a counselor. This is the pre-court session, and it may feel invasive or overwhelming, right? Because Alex will have to answer some of the questions related to the incident, and basically it might lead to re-traumatization. So ABA strategy for that might be previewing the process. Use the visual again or verbal supports for communication, and ensure caregiver's presence is helpful. Sometimes maybe a trusted adult, support worker, or if the behavioral consultant is involved, that might be easier for everyone to, remove a parent, but really depends on the case. So follow up with a relaxing, rewarding activity, maybe plan it with Alex. What would you like to do after we have this unpleasant visit, right? Potentially unpleasant. Next, appearing in an online court. These days, usually that's how it looks. You don't have to go in person, you go online. So waiting for long periods and dealing with uncertainty, that may be hard. Doesn't matter shiny or not, it is a lot of time, right, with your day. So strategies we can use here: provide, again, visual schedule and a timer. Allow for movement and sensory regulation as well. Incorporate some cultural grounding strategies, of course. For example, smudge, breathing, maybe presence of an elder or auntie, right? A trusted person from the community. Again, use token system for motivation. So again, plan, what are you going to do after, what do you want to get once we are through this? So support should be trauma informed and culturally respectful. Alex's strengths, voice, and comfort must guide the process, with room for Indigenous practices and support, people wherever they're possible. I guess that's the main point. Thank you.
You know what? He might be referred to the Youth Justice Program at Dnaagdawenmag, Binnoojiiyag, Child and Family Services. Well, this is our Youth Justice Program, and it's designated for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis youth who are between the ages of 12 to 17 who are in conflict with the law. So they support, we have support workers, specifically youth justice workers, who walk alongside these youth, and it's very specific that they have to be between 12 to 17 at the time of offense. But let's just say that, these court processes take a while, right? So they might have had an offense at 16, but they're first entering like the court system at 18 or 19. They would still fall under this, our eligibility, right? So our youth justice workers actually provide culturally based supports and healing approaches, as well as assisting with any rehabilitation and reintegration needs on an individualized basis. So this program provides many services: introduction and access to ceremonial and cultural activities and events, guidance and teachings with elders or traditional people, support, advocacy, resources, and transportation assistance as needed to mainstream services and during court, as well as health and wellness support. So our guidelines, they must be First Nation, Inuit, or Métis and identify as Indigenous. They must be between the ages of 12 to 17 at the time of offense, and they must have been found guilty or on probation, awaiting trial or court. They also might be on conditional supervision at this moment, or maybe community supervision, or they could even be in custody or detention and preparing for discharge. So Dnaagdawenmag Binnoojiiyag Youth Justice System, a youth justice program supports and services are culturally based to address the mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional needs of Indigenous youth living on or off reserve. So if you know an Indigenous youth who might benefit or be a good fit for this program, the referrals can be submitted through our webpage, which you can see in the lower right-hand corner, binnoojiiyag.ca. So you'll find our youth justice program on our page, and you can make an open referral there. And again, this is a voluntary program, so they must have to consent to be a part of this. Miigwech.
Thank you. That's awesome. I really like that, we have those programs these days, right? Because even with with all the information we've covered, navigating the system is really hard, right? So on the clinical side of it, at Center of Behavioral Health Science, we offer a clinical justice program, and it's specifically designed for people who experience the world differently. And on this slide, you'll see 4 core pillars of that support. I'm not going to stop for too long on that. It's a lot of information, but maybe, yeah, so we have dual diagnosis justice clinic, adaptive dialectical behavioral therapy justice app that is recommended. It's a practical tool to help, track court dates and so on. And we also have justice resources for individuals with acquired brain injuries. This is a resource that provide specialized support for understanding and navigating legal processes. With that, I think we can move to the next slide that is more related to the topic today. So the CBHS or behavioral, right, clinical justice program. First, dual diagnosis justice clinical coordinator. This is a person who supports people, right? So there are 2 of those positions across the Central East region. One covers Durham and let me remember, the Halliburton, Kawartha, Pine Ridge district. And the other covers York and Simcoe. I'm more familiar with York and Simcoe. That's why I'm like, I don't remember the other one, but yes. So anyways, so the dual diagnosis justice clinical coordinator, the coordinator can support both accused individuals and victims or witnesses and can become involved at any stage of the legal process. The key responsibilities include case coordination, linking individuals to appropriate supports, discharge and justice-related planning, cross-sectoral collaboration. For example, if it's an Indigenous person, right, and coordinator understands, finds out like, okay, I don't really have any knowledge, any experience, so they would reach out for agencies. For example, Dnaagdawenmag, Binnoojiiyag, I know we have some collaborative cases there. So advocacy and capacity building with justice professionals, that's a very important and sometimes hard skill to have. So obviously, if you need support, you can do that. Important eligibility note, this coordinator supports are only available to individuals who are 16 years old or older and eligible for or already connected to the DSO, which stands for Developmental Services Ontario. So there should be an official diagnosis, like a clinical diagnosis or paper for that, or a letter for a psychologist sometimes, that they might be eligible. Next, it's a justice specialist. So the justice specialist can work with youth and adults of any age who are neurodivergent or shiny and have a confirmed diagnosis as well. For example, autism, intellectual disability, or acquired brain injury. So again, paper would be helpful. Once referral is received, the justice specialist can conduct a functional assessment to identify the individual's goals and support needs. Sounds very clinical, but basically it's a behavioral approach where we come, we observe, you and your natural environment. And then this is a part of the assessment, and we can ask a bunch of questions related to the behaviors, right? And based on that, we can come with some sort of support ideas, right, and plan. So in CBHS, we use like biopsychosocial approach. If you attended our previous workshops, it's an approach that relates to a lot of pieces of medicine wheel, right? So we try to see the person as a whole within the context of Western medicine. So, and we use it to understand and contribute, all the contributing factors and barriers, not just the behavioral piece. Yeah, and based on those assessments, we collect baseline data to guide the treatment plan, as it's called. From this assessment, usually justice specialist comes up with individualized behavioral justice plan. It's and it is developed to directly teach and target needed skills. In Alex's case, how do we go to fingerprinting, what to expect, what to do, what not to do, and how to work on regulation, for example. If relevant to an upcoming trial, a court support plan also can be created and shared with all involved parties. And again, support includes ongoing monitoring to track progress, ensure skill maintenance, and promote generalization. In some areas or based on capacity, support may be provided virtually because we sometimes are limited with, in-person locations. So the goal is to help individuals meaningfully engaged in the justice process and build the skills necessary to navigating it successfully. Because again, not always it is easy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm curious, so they can find this information on the Mackenzie Health website?
Yes, I believe the general link was in takeaways, right?
Okay, perfect.
Yes,
We'll
but
take a
yes,
peek.
they definitely can go to the Mackenzie Health website, and under behavioral services, core services, there will be a link to that program. That's
Awesome.
a great point. Thank you.
So our goals today, the takeaways that we really wanted to, contribute today is that, support needs to be individualized. So we should tailor programs to their needs. We can provide visual aids, written instructions, break down the steps. That's really important, right? So it's not all so overwhelming, because it's going to be. So, but there are things that we can do to implement, an individualized plan. And equity, right? So we have to make sure that we're giving that equitable support, and that equitable management is vital, right? So preparation and practice so that the person can understand the process ahead of time, and then we want to coordinate. So we want to make sure that we're involving all the supports that we possibly can and being communicative with them. So arranging transport to court, connecting them to professionals, and making sure that all documents are collected involving family, making sure that they're coming together, right, to support this person. And then advocating, right? That's the biggest part of it, I believe. So supporting is about identifying their needs and walking alongside them to build and tend to their spirit fire. And last but not least, providing resources that are going to bring purpose to the individual. Connection to culture is a priority in these moments as well. And with these resources, key contacts, Legal Aid Ontario, local, the court support diversion programs like the CMHA, they have some programs. Aboriginal Legal Services Toronto, that's what I was trying to get at earlier in this presentation. They include information and preparation on collecting reports in Ontario, and then also the Vulnerable Persons Registry. Do you want to take a moment to speak on what that is, Karina?
Sure. So basically, it's just registration. You, as a caregiver, you can register a youth or child with the police, and usually how it looks in practice, if something happens and somebody calls the police to attend to the child, if they have an address or the name, right, any ID information, they will put it in their computer while on the call, and they will have this little blurb with the information. For example, the child has sensory needs, it has official diagnoses. So
So they might send
police
out a
doesn't go
specialist or something, right? When they
exactly,
come
because
out,
in
like a
some
mental health worker as well.
yes, correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, because some areas are lucky enough to have this mental health support team
Right.
within the police. So yeah, they might send those people, and sorry, usually it's more supportive and
Good.
more
Thank you.
gentle, I would say.
And then here's that Justice app we were talking about earlier. So pause, take a moment. You can download this with that QR code. You can find it on the App Store or on Google Play. So the goal of the Justice app is to build capacity by outlining information from first contact with police all the way through the criminal justice system. So that's great. And I would definitely take a look at that. It looks like they updated the victim witness section as of spring 2025. So that's good that we got it's nice and updated and fresh. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then here is the central link. It's the ABI resource library. So acquired brain injury, I believe. Their resource library. It talks about it's a wide variety, a wide ranging collection of central region, provincial, and federal resources that can facilitate navigation to funded support services for persons with an acquired brain injury, caregivers, and support professionals. So you'll find resources in the areas of ABI supports and services, communication supports and social services, specialized supports and services, accessibility and healthcare, but it also has some information about justice, right? The justice system and what have you. So you can either, follow this link, or I would also recommend to take your phone out, take a snapshot, pause for a second, and use that QR code as well.
Yeah, And here as piece of resource, right, we have this first appearance checklist. I invite you to maybe take a screenshot for that if you need that. So really, what can you do as a caregiver? Bring all the paperwork from the police or court, arrive 15-30 minutes early, especially for in-person court, but even it actually counts for online as well sometimes. So check the docket to see which courtroom to go. Put the username on the duty council list for the free legal support that day. Another tip for caregivers, this is early stage and this is critical, not to put too much pressure, but this is within your role to provide the support. So help the youth feel prepared by walking them through what to expect, organizing their papers, and being present with the calm reassurance. Justice system can feel overwhelming, so your support makes a big difference, especially for neurodivergent or shiny youth who thrive on structure and adaptability.
Much. And you'll see that we did the teaching healthy sexuality workshop, which should be posted when this is posted as well. And then our final one was supporting success through behavioral strategies. Gwetch, this is our survey monkey. So please go complete this survey to let us know how we did. If there was anything we missed or anything that you particularly liked that you'd like to see again, let us know. Gwetch. References. A lot of references. A lot of references. And Chimiigwech. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. We really do appreciate that you took the time out of your day to come and speak and hang out with us in whatever way that might look like for you. But enjoy and bon appetit.
Goodbye.